More than 3 years ago, Blexit launched its Educate to Liberate tour, visiting HBCU campuses to ignite honest dialogue and civil debate. The movement has surged in prominence following the tragic assassination of Turning Point founder Charlie Kirk. According to his website, Blexit aims to influence culture by mobilizing individuals to spark conversations. One of the most important places to spark conversations is on a college campus. Rather than encouraging the dialogue, some are telling students to do the opposite.
Do not engage, do not engage, do not engage. Do not engage. Ignore them. Do not engage, do not debate, don't boo them, don't acknowledge. Get campus security.
When you have schools that send out emails to their students saying, don't even talk to us, you can research this. There are schools that are openly telling students not to even talk to us.
Fortunately, at Bowie State University, students didn't get the memo. Civil discourse is the new brave.
Hopefully that bravery of hearing something different and not being afraid can permeate and then bubble out like a little a ripple effect in the pond to everyone else. And it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, and we just have to be patient with the results.
And what is the dangerous message that Blexit dares to share with Black college students?
We really want to empower the community and talk to them about conservative values like school choice, entrepreneurship, upholding traditional family, the nuclear family, upholding the sanctity of life. All of those things are really important. And yes, that's why I'm here.
They stuck in this program mindset and they think that their way is the only way. If you don't do it this way, you're Uncle Tom McCoon. So we're here to let them know that, no, you don't have to think like this. You could do your own research and come up with your own conclusions.
And even what they know about conservatism, they learn from a liberal, So it's important for conservatives to have a voice there so that these students can get the full picture and then make an informed decision, a decision that is theirs, not their moms, not their dads, not their grandparents, not their teachers or their professor, a decision that is theirs. And if anybody's afraid of that, then I would ask them, what are they afraid of?
Voices rising, minds awakening. Blexit's message resonates here at Bowie State. I'm Dee Bass-Wilbon, reporting for the Armstrong-Williams Show. Armstrong, back to you.
Thank you, Dee, for that fine reporting. Let me welcome Tyler, Victoria, and Louis now to the broadcast. Louis, how do you respond to that package?
Well, yes, conservatives need to have a voice, and I think colleges for too long have been dominated by a liberal mindset. I think in the top 10 universities in the United States, 98% of faculty are registered Democrats, and that is very problematic for the diversity of thought in the country, and that's obviously detrimental to democracy. And we've seen a pushback from young conservatives. Of course, Turning Point USA being a great example, leading the way on U.S. campuses to present conservative ideas and also debate the established ideas that are, of course, liberal in the liberal colleges across the country.
Victoria, former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, is retiring. When I think of this assassin, Tyler Robinson, and when I think of the attempted assassination on the life of Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, when I think about the legislators that were killed in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we all have said that it's the rhetoric from people on social media, videos that they watch, that fill them with this hatred and this venom to go out to do these despicable acts. But the former Speaker of the House said just this week that Donald Trump is the worst person on the planet, Tyler and Louis, not Putin, not Hamas, not ISIS, not Al-Qaeda, not serial killers, but that Donald Trump is the worst human being on planet Earth and that she finds him vile. When a former Speaker of the House makes a comment like that, that's a dog whistle. Victoria, it's a dog whistle for some sicko, some demented, mentally deranged person to say, oh, let's take them out. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, over the past month and a half, 6 weeks or so since the murder in cold blood of Charlie Kirk in front of thousands of people, we have seen politicians on one hand say that the temperature of the rhetoric needs to be turned down, but then on the other hand, a week or two or a month later, they're going out and really escalating the rhetoric. And so I think Congress needs to really do what they think they should be doing in terms of people looking at them, right? If they want to be these people that the whole country looks up to as leaders, as elected representatives, they need to lead, and they need to lead by example. And not only in Congress, but for example, in Virginia, after the decisive victories for Democrats, one of the top leaders, Louise Lucas, in the Democrat Party in Virginia, she posted a video it was an edited video, an AI edited video of Jay Jones, who's now the Attorney General-elect in Virginia. There was a video of him going around where it looked like he kicked a dog, and Louise Lucas took that video, AI edited now to be former Attorney General Miyares' face onto it, where it looked like Jay Jones was kicking Miyares into space. And so on one hand, people want to tone down the rhetoric, but then on the other hand, you have very top leaders in a state that many people are looking at, particularly on the day of the election that we just had here this past week, escalating that kind of rhetoric, particularly online.
Tyler, is this how the inside the locker room Democrats really feel about Donald Trump? I mean, listen, Tyler, that is hatred. That is venomous.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think our politics has gotten to the point where people are in these bubbles. You're constantly reading news. And nobody is entirely immune to this. I'm constantly looking at news that paints the left and Democrats in a negative light. And I try to find, the good aspects, even with this Jay Jones story, which continues to shock me to my core. I tried to go, I reached out to Tim Kaine's people, because Tim Kaine has been saying, I knew Jay Jones since he was 11. I know this isn't his real character, calling for, wishing the death of children because their parents are conservative. And I listened to what Tim Kaine's whole statement was. He said he knew Jay Jones since he was 11. He vouched for Jay Jones's character. And then he said, and this is something that really I don't know if I trust Tim Kaine on, but he said even if a Republican had sent these horrible texts and then apologized afterward, he would not be calling for the Republican to drop out of a race. And I think that's kind of convenient for Tim Kaine to say. But we in our current system, it's very easy to always hear the negative over and over and over again. And I do think many Democrats have started to really, in their hearts, hate Donald Trump. And that's a dangerous place to be. And I prayed for the president when Joe Biden was president. And trust me, I am not a fan of Joe Biden, especially what he did. But you pray for the president. This is our Christian calling, is to pray for our leaders and to hope for the best. And I think what we have to do, we have to be vigilant. We have to speak the truth. We have to call things out when we see them. But I think it's really important for our national debate, our consensus to be, let's hope that our leaders are not evil. Let's not be imputing to Donald Trump hatred of Americans. You can disagree with his policies, but the idea suggesting that Donald Trump is racist or vile or hateful or, worse than anybody else on the planet right now, as Pelosi did. There's a guy in Russia who just invaded Ukraine and is engaged in this war of conquest. And sure, he has his own justifications for it. He talks about Ukraine being the heartland of Russia going all the way back. But we all know what Putin's really doing here. And the idea that Donald Trump, who is bringing peace in many parts of the world, that yes, I understand Pelosi doesn't agree with him on a lot of things.
Yeah, but let me just say this, okay? Now, Donald Trump stood on the stage at Charlie Kirk's funeral when his wife was asking for forgiveness and she forgave the assassin. And Donald Trump made it clear that he hates his enemies. He's going to punish his enemies. The problem is Donald Trump's rhetoric and Nancy Pelosi's rhetoric. Donald Trump is all those things you said in terms of the good that he does, but let me tell you something. His speech and the things that he says also contributes to this environment. Let me bring this up, Louis. I don't understand this narrative that the Democrats had a sweeping victory this past Tuesday night. Now, for my history, Donald Trump lost Minnesota a year ago this week. He lost New York. He lost California. He lost New Jersey. These are all blue states. So what I don't understand. And he lost Virginia. So why is this such a sweeping victory? Now, if they went in red states, that would be a different story. And the Somalian who was speaking their language as he was running for mayor during his campaign and waving the Somalian flag and not the American flag, they defeated him. That had nothing to do with Donald Trump or Republicans. The people in Minnesota just woke up and said, we're not having you, buddy. You've just gone too far. That's people coming back to their common sense and putting America first. But what was so sweeping about the victory this week?
I think that's just another example of mainstream media trying to twist the narrative. This is an off-year election. Most of the special elections, Virginia, New Jersey, New York mayorship, and the ballot initiative in California, all very blue states. This was what's supposed to happen. And actually, when I saw the New York mayor race results, I was surprised. You know, this is a race that had national attention, and Mandini won with 50.1% of the vote. If you add Cuomo's and Sliwa's votes, that gets you to 49. So this was a huge mandate for Mandini. This was an entire New York wanting a radical change to this socialist ideology. And actually, yes, there are record numbers of people who went to the polls. And that's because there were record people of also plus 65, plus 55 that went early voting. And these were people who were voting against Mandini. And then again, adding to the context of the New York mayorship race, Cuomo was probably the worst candidate that you could field in opposition of Mandini. This was a person who is the epitome of status quo, has sexual harassment scandals, has COVID scandals, has corruption scandals, and was politically dead and resurrected just for this race in opposition to Mandini. So yeah, I think mainstream media is making it seem like Democrats now have a mandate that everyone in the American people is now against Trump. But no, this is off-year election. Month 10 of the Trump administration, obviously it's a very peculiar and unprecedented administration. I don't think there's anything that the Democratic Party actually learned going into the midterms from these special elections.
And let me say this. A year ago this time, many Americans were just joyous that Donald Trump won the popular and the electoral vote. And so this time around, the Democrats celebrating their victories in their blue states. And listen, the people have spoken, and we should respect the will of the people, whether we like it or not. That's who we are as Americans. Are you related to Winston Churchill?
No, I'm not.
Okay, I just thought I'd ask. So, Ms. Churchill.
Yes.
I was listening to the Supreme Court arguments in this back and forth on Trump and these tariffs. Now, I know the Supreme Court, one thing they don't like are these narratives of being a rubber stamp for Donald Trump. It's not looking too good if you follow the oral arguments about whether they're going to rubber stamp his tariffs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is really what the founders intended, right? When they created 3 robust branches of government, is that they wanted to have an executive, they wanted to have a legislative branch, and then they wanted to have the judicial system, which of course the very top of that is the Supreme Court. You know, we've already seen the Senate, which I primarily covered my role at the Daily Mail. The Senate reputed some of Trump's tariffs last week. You know, this wasn't just Democrat senators, this was a handful of Republican senators who are not always Trump's favorites, but they were able to voice their opposition to that. And then now the Supreme Court is having their say. And so I think, you know, this is really the founders' creation. We are seeing it really brought up in the most vibrant way at one of the top issues for the movement, I think really for the conservative movement today, because this is something that a lot of people within the conservative movement disagree on, you know, whether they want to have more protectionist trade policies, whether they want to have a more aggressive enforcement. And, you know, I think it's also interesting to note whether Trump is actually applying these tariffs, how he's doing it, and whether he wants them as a bargaining chip or whether he actually plans to plant them, because throughout the first 10 months of the administration, we've seen a lot of times that he will say one thing, but then actually roll back some of those things, that he will use that as a bargaining chip when he goes on one of his numerous foreign trips that he's been on. Of course, he just came back from Asia. And so, I think, again, a lot of the time his bark is probably worse than his bite when it comes to the tariff issue.
Tyler, this should be disappointing to many people in this country, particularly conservatives, because the GOP stance for eliminating the filibuster is gaining steam as a result of pressure from President Trump. If they go along with that, because I know there's something that John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, does not want to do, it could prove disastrous if the Democrats take over power again in Congress.
Yeah, I think this is a very close thing to watch. President Trump is frustrated at the lack of progress in Congress, but at the end of the day, it's a live question whether the Senate majority should reconsider the filibuster. The filibuster is very important. It protects the rights of the minority. It's one of the things that prevented the Senate from going whole bore with some of the more radical things that President Biden wanted in the last 4 years. And so I think this is the president needs to consider, he wants to keep the government, he wants to reopen the government now. And I think it's very important for the American people to understand what's happening with this shutdown is that Democrats are demanding extra things in a funding bill where Republicans are already bending over backward to keep the government open. They're funding it at Biden era levels. That's not a popular thing among conservatives and Republicans. We want there to be less government funding. But Republicans are willing to keep the high levels of funding in order to reopen the government. And Democrats, instead of taking that win, have decided that they are going to fight for these Obamacare subsidies, which were always meant to be temporary during COVID, but now they want to make them permanent. And it's because Obamacare doesn't really work the way that it's created to. And I wonder whose problem that is. So, we have this situation where Democrats are trying to save Obamacare and holding the entire government hostage and essentially blaming it on Republicans in this most bizarre sort of shutdown we've ever seen. And now it's the longest shutdown in American history, and we're not seeing the end of it at this point. So I understand President Trump's frustrations.
Trump is frustrated because for some reason the loss in those blue states on Tuesday stung him. He was somewhat surprised, and he actually believes that the government shutdown contributed to the greater losses in these states. And so Trump is not guided by a principle. He's guided now by calculation. I just wanted to say that. The paramilitary group that killed thousands and thousands of people in Sudan, the Sudanese, just sad situation, just agreed to a ceasefire as a result of the White House intervening. Why does this happen? How can you just mow down thousands of people? And only when the United States intervened, not the United Nations, not some other organization of stature, not the Europeans, all of a sudden they agree. And innocent people just die.
Well, I've actually been saying it even here on your show, Armstrong Williams, that how the media manipulated the situation, for example, in Gaza, where the displaced and the people under dire issues of hunger were close to 1 million, 2 million people. But Sudan, for the past year, has had over 20 million people in starvation. And of course, right now, the last couple of weeks, we've seen the RSF just kill people as they're fleeing cities. And Sudan has been an issue for the past 20 years, and it just pops up and goes away in the media when it's convenient. And it just shows how hypocritical the international system and how dysfunctional the United Nations is, that things of greater magnitude are happening but get no attention. But whenever it's convenient, then they do pop up. So the outrage that maybe the Europeans showed during the last year in the crisis in Gaza and Israel against Hamas is again, it's evidence as hypocritical when you see the massacres that are happening in Sudan, and it's not going to have any quick solution. And I would also call out President Trump that said that he'd interfere militarily in Nigeria against the persecution of Christians, but hasn't had the same impetus when you see people being killed by the hundreds and the thousands in Sudan. So there's clearly an issue with the values of the international order, and the face of it, the mask of it all is falling off in front of our eyes.
But in all fairness, they were behind the scenes negotiating, and that's why there is a ceasefire. There are always different tactics that bring an end to these massacres and these genocides. So I want to give the president credit that it was his intervention. You know, Victoria, it's interesting because the Trump administration are now going to raise the SNAP food benefit payments after a calculation error.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one of the glaring things that has come out of this SNAP crisis is the fact that we've even firsthand have 42 million Americans on SNAP. I want to talk about how we actually got there. I'm surprised that that number is as high as it is, because I think that right, just in the name of it, it's supposed to be supplemental nutrition assistance. And I think what we've seen, from videos that people have posted online is that they are relying on it for their entire grocery budget. They don't know how to provide food for their families without it. And so, for me, that's just the very concerning thing out front, is that so many people are so reliant on government. I know in the earlier segment you were talking about, Mom Dami wants to give free everything to people. That, of course, is jarring, but it turns out that a lot of people have really been living that life already, regardless of administration. And I've also seen other videos of people online that, now they know how to go and buy meat in bulk and how to freeze it. And I thought those were just common sense things that anybody did when they went to the grocery store, but, apparently not. And another kind of similar vein that I've seen pop up is that people, are now just straight up stealing from the grocery store now that their SNAP benefits haven't hit. And of course, in many places, they won't even be prosecuted because the value of what they're stealing is under $900 because, for some reason now that's acceptable in so many jurisdictions across the country.
But I also saw where these thieves went into the jewelry store in Houston to try to pull off their own version of Lulu, and the store owner killed two. And they just finally had the trial, and those two were found guilty for the murder of the others because it never would have happened. They did not try to steal. So if you're going into a store stealing, or someone's jewelry store or anything else with these owners who are already struggling, be prepared to die. Now, Tyler, I must ask you this. It's going to be a little uncomfortable for you, but I must. Kevin Roberts, I've known a long time. And when I heard him trying to defend his friend Tucker, and who should have never given a platform to Nick Fuentes, even though I believe in the freedom of speech. But he finally gave a speech where he apologized, and it got it wrong. How do these things happen?
So based on what Kevin said, he was under the impression that the statement that had been written had been approved internally by the Heritage Enterprise, and that approval did not happen. And so what happened was essentially they went off half-cocked in a way that I'm sure the rest of Heritage never would have approved.
You mean his chief of staff who's no longer his chief of staff?
Correct. Yes. So, and this is the thing, like, there are a lot of people in Heritage and in the movement that are naturally very angry at Kevin Roberts. But if you look at the totality of what Kevin has done, if you look at the fact that he started the Combat Anti-Semitism, the coalition to fight anti-Semitism across the globe, he's not a closet anti-Semite. He is a rock-ribbed conservative who's going to the mat.
Tyler, we know Kevin
we know
is not anti. We know his, but the fact is, he allowed his friendship to cloud his judgment.
And he has apologized.
Yes, and we must all learn
He's
lessons.
moved.
Myself and
Yes.
everybody here, sometimes when you're in a position of influence, you cannot give a platform to people who are anti-Semite, racist, bigoted. You just cannot.